All right. Hey, good morning, everybody. It is Wednesday morning, March the 6th, 2025. Hope you're having a beautiful day. And we're going to be this morning back in our Torah portion, Tetzaveh, which means you will command. And the title of today's Daily Manna is Clothed in Purpose. There, I did that again. Clothed in Purpose. Understanding God's role or our role in God's kingdom. And just if you just want to take a moment to hit like and subscribe. Now, just I wanted to make mention of something real quick because I also mentioned in there if you'd be willing to give. And I want to thank all of you that so faithfully give and support the ministry. And you're faithful in your tithes. There is a project for all intents and purposes that we're wanting to raise funds for. It's not a project as it were, but it's what we've discovered is that, and I'm probably way behind on this, is that there's basically a way to advertise so that your YouTube videos will boost and will go out and make a wider impact. And so we're wanting to, we were looking and the idea of being able to increase to where we would have, thousands of subscribers so that, and potentially thousands of viewers just by, I'm looking at things that would cost altogether around $600 to $700, and then what that would end up doing was help also provide support and income for the ministry. So I'm not great at asking for offerings, but I am asking you if you'd be willing prayerfully to consider, on top of any tithes and offerings, to give $5, $10, $25 and designate it toward advertising, as it were. If we could do that, I believe we can make a much wider and bigger impact, so that we can see the word of the Lord really going forth. And then that can actually help produce where it can help continue to fund the ministry so that we can even do more and make a greater impact. So I hope that you understand that. I never want to be, just, I don't know, just, it's worth it. It's worth it. I don't mean to be timid in asking, and I don't ever want to be crass in asking, but it's worth it for us to get the word of the Lord out there. And if you're able to invest, if you have our app, if you have downloaded our app, you can go right in there and you can give, and you can in the memo just say what you want it to go toward just, let's say, advertising, so that way we can boost our channel, and that would be amazing. So let's get back to the word this morning. If you would, last week was about contributions, but I believe that God is calling us to make a wider and greater impact. Well, today's Daily Manna is entitled, again, Clothed in Purpose. We're going to be looking at at Exodus 28. And we're going to be looking specifically at the vestments, the garments of the high priest. And there's a lot here. I think of when the writer of Hebrews in Hebrews chapter 9 begins to describe the tabernacle. And he says, I don't have time to go into all that. There's so much here that we're limited in our time. But let's hit the heart of it this morning. But let's begin in Exodus 28. Exodus 28, beginning in verse 1. The Lord speaks directly to Moses, and it opens with Ve'ata, you. And you are to bring your brother near to yourself, he says. Bring your brother near to yourself with his sons from among the children of Israel, so that they may minister to me as Kohanim, so for priestly service to me. You're to bring your brother and his sons from the midst of the children of Israel, so that they may minister to me as Kohanim. Aaron and his sons Nadav, Avihu, Eleazar, and Ithamar. So now we encountered the names of Aaron's sons back in the genealogy of Exodus 6:23. And Nadab and Abihu, or Nadav and Abihu, you'll remember, they accompanied their father and Moses and the elders of Israel partway up to Mount Sinai, and were there encountering the Lord. In that incredible ending in Exodus 24, in the covenantal ceremony, and they actually later are struck down because they offer strange or unauthorized fire before the Lord. They are being instructed, they are being tasked with something very holy here, and they don't, even after everything, they don't take it as seriously as they should, and to the point where the Lord strikes them. And then he mentioned, so Nadab and Abihu, and then Eleazar and Ithamar. Eleazar will succeed the high priesthood when his father, he's the one that becomes the next high priest at the death of his father. You can see that in Numbers chapter 20, verses 25 and 26. Take Aaron and his son Eleazar and bring them up to Mount Hor, and strip Aaron of his garments and put them on his son Eleazar. So Aaron will be gathered to his people and will die there. And so the garments, the clothes make the man, as it were, in this. At this point, now Eleazar will step into the high priesthood when we get to Numbers chapter 20. His other son Ithamar is one who actually ends up overseeing the building of the tabernacle. We see this in Exodus 38:21. These are the accounts of the tabernacle of the testimony as they were recorded according to the commandment of Moses by the service of the Levites under the hand of Ithamar, son of Aaron the Cohen, so the priest. So, there are those that say then that the priestly line of house of Eli seems to have descended from Ithamar. So, but here we find out there's an inherited nature of the high priesthood. Aaron and his sons, with clarity, the Lord said, Aaron and his sons are going to serve as priests. Right? This is not something they've chosen. This is not a personal ambition. It's a divine calling. They didn't campaign for the position. They didn't buy their way into it. God chose them. Right? So the priesthood, specifically the high priesthood, was dynastic, right? It was passed from father to son. The role of prophet, for instance, if you compare prophet and priest, you have king is dynastic, but there's no king at this point. So prophet is passed, and Moses is the prophet. Moses is not the priest here. He's not the high priest here. He might have been, but you'll recall that the whole reason that Aaron was brought into this is Aaron became a priest of sorts, functioned as a priest between Moses, who would serve. Remember, the Lord says it's going to be like the way this is going to play out is going to be like you're my voice, that you're God, and Aaron is going to serve as the priest, the intermediary, communicating with Pharaoh. So Aaron had been functioning in this priestly way as an intermediary to this point. And so this is what he's called to do, to function in that way. The role of the prophet was not dynastic, right? It's not from father to son. Moses' own sons did not succeed him. Joshua, his disciple, did. And so the task of the priest is related to his office. There are duties that he has there are functions that he has. It's not about whether you have charisma, right? Whether you're the priest or not, it's not about if you can really wow the people, if the people will listen to you. Typically, prophets had more of a charisma. But priests, it wasn't about whether it was about your personality or your charisma. It's passed down from generation to generation within a family, right? That's within the tribe of Israel. Can't be taken by power or influence. And only God would make someone a priest. So let's look here. And in particular, this passage now focuses on the vestments, the garments of the priest. Verse 2 It says, you are to make holy garments. The word here is big day. You're going to make garments of holiness for your brother Aaron, for splendor, which the word there is glory, kavod, so a weightiness, for splendor or glory, and for beauty. So these are going to be beautiful, and it's going to convey a weightiness. And so what follows here, and we'll read it through to capture the heart of it, but let's kind of hit a big overview, because what follows here is centered around what the high priest is to wear. Again, we'll read through the text, but let's get a quick overview. So, Rafi, if you do a full screen on the priestly garments of the picture of the priest here. So, let's just quickly, according to 28:42, he has linen undergarments at the lowest layer. The priest wore linen undergarments that went from waist to thighs. And then over that, he had a linen tunic. In verse 39, a garment that was kind of like a long nightshirt. The tunic was the basic garment for men and women in the ancient world. And then a sash was normally tied around the waist. And we see that in verse 4, and then again in Leviticus 8:7. Then he's to wear there's a robe of the ephod. There's a blue robe. So above his tunic, the priest wore a large blue robe, fringed now at the bottom with decorative pomegranate embroidery, and then the bells. There are the bells that are there around the lower hem, and this is called the robe of the ephod. We read about it in verses 31 to 35. And then you see the ephod. The ephod over this robe is the ephod itself, which is kind of like an apron, and it's connected front and back by two shoulder pieces that are mounted on it. The shoulder pieces extended down in front, perhaps in back, somewhere to around the middle of the priest's chest. So this particular depiction that you're looking at, it probably went down a little bit further, but maybe, and attached the ephod just below the bottom of the shoulder pieces, and above the rib cage was a woven belt called an ephודה, and then in the middle of the priest's chest, attached to the ephod shoulder pieces by chains of pure gold and cords of blue yarn, was a breast piece. And that breast piece had all the stones for the 12 tribes of Israel in the order of their birth. And then there's the headpiece. On his head he wore a turban, and on it was a golden emblem saying, "Holy to the Lord, holy to Adonai." All right, so that gives you kind of the overview, and we can just keep that picture in the I guess right here. And verse 2, again, you are to make whole. What's that? We can't? Because you can't do it with you'd have to do it using the PowerPoint, but that's okay. You saw it. You can go back. Verse 2 again, you are to make holy garments for your brother Aaron, for splendor and for beauty. So this is for glory and for beauty. So this is a little like, so if you're reading through the scriptures and you've met Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and you're following this story, this is the first time that we really encounter anything among the people of Israel that would be like robes of office, right? There's been no focus to this point on clothing that's chosen by God or of those that are chosen by God, right? Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob didn't wear any special clothes. Moses wasn't depicted as wearing anything special. These were all shepherds. They were dressed very simply. And we understand, even going forward, that one of the most famous verses in the scripture tells us that what the Lord is really concerned about is our inward condition, right? When Samuel is sent to look for the new king of Israel, who would follow Saul. Saul is the man who looked like a king. We saw this in 1 Samuel. We see this later in 1 Samuel 16, verses 6 and 7. It says, upon their arrival, Samuel saw Eliab and thought, Like when he saw him, he said, surely Adonai's anointed one is before him. But Adonai said to Samuel, don't look at his appearance or his stature, because I have already refused him. For he does not see a man as man sees. For man looks at the outward appearance, but Adonai looks into the heart. So the focus of biblical faith, the focus is generally on character, not on appearances, right? It's on ethics. It's on character. It's not on power or outward displays, fine clothes of grandeur. That's not where the focus is. Now, there are two occasions we know of where we find kind of biblical heroes that are donned with robes of majesty. There's like in a kind of a political kind of way. There's Joseph in Egypt when he is made second in command. It said, we read in Genesis 41:42, then Pharaoh removed his signet ring from his hand and put it on Joseph's hand, clothed him with fine linen garments, and put a chain of gold around his neck. So you have this kind of imagery. And then later, you'll remember for Purim, Mordecai in Persia is donned with robes that Haman wanted to wear, right? Haman wanted to wear, and he's led around the city on a horse, saying, "This is what is done for the man the king wants to honor." That's how the world does it, right? In Egypt, in Persia. It's not really generally a focus within Judaism or in biblical faith. Rabbi Jonathan Sacks, he's a English British rabbi. He writes this. He says, "A culture that worships external symbols of power will in the end lack the inwardness of humanity to respect the dignity of the powerless." I thought it was a really great quote. Now, up to this point, there are 5 times in Genesis that we do turn to the subject of clothes. So I'll just take a moment, because in Genesis 27:15, we're not going to look at that, but when Jacob put on Esau's garments, his big day, the word is big day, like big day, but it's not like big day. He put on Esau's best clothes in order to take to receive Isaac's blessing. Jacob put on Esau's clothes to get Isaac's blessing. In Genesis 37:3, of course, famously, there's the coat of the coat of many colors, or more literally the richly embroidered cloak that Jacob made for his son, for his favorite son. And then we read about clothing in Genesis 38. Tamar removes her widow's garments in order to attract Judah. She puts on the clothes of a prostitute. In Genesis 39, there is the cloak that is Joseph leaves in the hands of Potiphar's wife when he flees from her attempts to seduce him. And then the passage we mentioned earlier, Genesis 41, were the clothes that Joseph is given in Egypt. And what you find up to this point, what links all of those the focus on clothing there, is that the garments are at different points used to deceive, right? So Jacob uses Esau's clothes to deceive his blind father Isaac when he puts out his hand to feel who he is. And then Joseph's tunic, Joseph's robe, richly embroidered robe, remember his brothers covered it in blood and used that to deceive their father, to deceive Jacob, to say, hey, Joseph was killed by a wild animal. And then, of course, Tamar changes her clothes to hide her identity from Judah. Pharaoh's wife uses Joseph's robe to bolster her claim that he had tried to violate her. And then at the end in Genesis 41, Joseph is in this newfound appearance as a kind of a senior Egyptian ruler, and he uses that to hide his identity from his brothers. So the garments sort of are used as a way to hide. In fact, the whole message conveyed by the very first reference to garments in the Torah, in the Bible, is that when Adam and Eve tried to cover themselves, tried to hide themselves from God, And so then he covered them with animal skins. So it begs the question then, why then, if that's sort of the sense that you've had regarding the focus on garments, if it's about just hiding something, why does the Lord command Moses to set in motion the making of these special garments for glory and for beauty, right? Well, the Lord's pointing to something. Because you see it in the ancient world and even today, the vestments signified authority. Well, Israel wasn't going to. There's no kingly garments. There's no king. He is the Lord is the king, right? Israel is a theocracy, not a monarchy, and so typically the kind of garments, vestments that conveyed dignity and authority, the kind of things that a king might have worn in other cultures, in Israel they're worn by the high priest, right? That this is where the Lord puts the emphasis. The role is here. The role of high priest, on the one that comes before the presence of God on behalf of the people. Right? This isn't about the individual Aaron or his sons. This is about the function that they have, the role that they're to walk in. And they, of course, have to step into that role. But it's not about their charisma. It's not about them. It's not about them being particularly worthy of this role. I mean, we'll find that out in short order with Aaron. First high priest doesn't even have his clothes on, these garments yet. Moses is on the mountain getting all these instructions. You're going to gather this to put together these clothes for the high priest. Meanwhile, he's down and overseeing the making of a golden calf. Right? So Aaron's personal charisma is going to fail in a big way. His older two sons, they fail in a big way. So leaders would come and go. Right? And the people of Israel, though, were to become who God had called them to be even after those leaders had come. When Moses goes, when Aaron goes, right? What happens? You take those vestments from Aaron and you put them on Eleazar, because God's purposes don't change. His ongoing representative would be clothed in special vestments that carry meaning, that convey something of the heart of God. Because remember, Israel as a whole is to be a kingdom of priests. That doesn't mean we're all wearing these vestments, far from it, right? But the vestments instruct us. They tell a story. They're a parable of sorts. They point to what a priest is called to do. And so they point to here's what the high priest does. And ultimately, as priests that see what he does, they reveal what we're called to do as a kingdom of priests, to make God known to the nations, to carry upon their hearts and their shoulders a burden for the nations, to be an intermediary between God and the nations. All of this, the tabernacle, the sacrifices, the priesthood is a parable, a picture that is pointing us to Yeshua and pointing us to the unchanging purposes of God. Because we're told, what God is concerned with, this is the outer garment. The outer is supposed to point to the inner. We have to step into what he's called us to be. Psalm 132, 7 says, let's go into his dwelling place, into his sanctuary, into his mishkan. Let's go into his tabernacle. Let us bow at his footstool. Verse 8 then alludes to the Ark of the Covenant. This is going into the innermost place. Arise, Adonai, to your resting place, you and the ark of your might. Verse 9, look. Let your Kohanim, your priests, have garments of or wear righteousness. And let your chastecha, let your chesed ones, your loved ones, let them sing for joy. May your priests be clothed in righteousness. Right? So when the phrase says here, let him be clothed in these robes for glory and for beauty, it doesn't mean to convey the glory and the beauty of the priest. It's pointing to the glory of God, the beauty of his presence, to come before him his purposes, with the beauty, the majesty of who he is on the high priest, right? The task, the role of the priest, the message of his clothes was to be a sign that points to something beyond himself, for him to be a living symbol of God's presence in the midst of the nation. We see in Isaiah 59 the idea of the clothes that the Messiah would wear when he comes to make things right, when he came to make things right. And then the imagery here, he says, verse 14, justice is turned back and righteousness stands far off, for truth has stumbled in the street and uprightness cannot enter. So now truth is missing. And whoever shuns evil becomes spoil or prey. And when Adonai saw this, a big day of vengeance, and wrapped himself in zeal as a cloak. And so being clothed, he's clothed in a breastplate of righteousness. And of course we see the armor of God and what gets pointed to us. So we don't wear priestly robes today, but the scripture tells us we're clothed in righteousness. And just as Aaron's garments reflected his calling, our lives are to reflect the holiness, the righteousness of God. Scripture says in 1 Peter 2, says, we are a chosen generation, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, that we should show forth the praises of him who called us out of darkness into his glorious light. Right? So we are to shine forth. We are to be wearing garments of righteousness in a way that reflects his presence for his glory and his beauty in our midst. Again, it's not about, I mean, you can look all fancy, right? This is pointing to something much more than that. Okay, let's go quickly now. Sorry. Look at verse 3. You're to speak to all who are, it says, skilled, literally to all the chochmei lev, is the wise of heart. Those whom I have filled with a spirit of wisdom. It says artistry here, but it's the word chokhmah. It's the same word that's used for skilled in artistry. Chokhmah, a spirit of wisdom, to make Aaron's garments for consecrating him so that he may minister to me as a Kohen. See, the garments are being made and are going to be made by those with the spirit of wisdom, those that God has filled with, that he has by his spirit filled with. And there's an anointing here, as it were, for their task, for these garments, for the priests. And the garments are there to express not what Aaron was in himself, but what he represented, what he was meant to be, what his office required him to be, right? So the garments, it's a sanctification. He's being set apart. They're figures of the truth that his function is what is centered on. Verse 4. These are the garments they're to make: a breastplate, an ephod, a robe, a tunic of checkered work, a turban, and a sash. They are to make holy garments for your brother Aaron and his sons, so he may minister to me as a Kohen, as a priest. They are to use gold, blue, purple, scarlet, and fine linen. Continuing verse 6. They are to make the ephod of gold, blue, purple, scarlet, and finely twisted linen, the work of skillful craftsmen. It is to have 2 shoulder pieces stitched to the ends so that it may be joined together. Right, so that it would be one, echad. And the skillfully woven band which is upon it, with which it is to be bound, is to be made like the design, and from the same piece of gold, blue, purple, scarlet, and finely twisted linen. Verse 9, listen to this. It's on the shoulders. You're to take 2 onyx stones and engrave on them the names of Bnei Israel. 6 of their names on the one stone, and the names of the remaining 6 on the other stone, in the order of their generations, in the order of their birth. With the work of a gem cutter, engraving a seal, etch the 2 stones in the order of the names of the children of Israel. Make them enclosed in settings of gold. Fasten the 2 stones upon the shoulder pieces of the ephod to be stones of remembrance for the children of Israel. And Aaron is to bear their names, is to lift up, is to carry their names. They're on his shoulders before Adonai, on his two shoulders as a reminder, as a memorial. So their names, everyone always focuses here, and that's true, but there's a carrying, there's a weightiness. Their names are on his shoulders. There's something that he is being entrusted with. Fashion filigree settings of gold along with the 2 chains of pure gold of braided work. And you will attach the chains to the filigree settings. Verse 15, make a breastplate of mishpat, of judgment or justice. The work of a skillful craftsman, of one who does it calculating, thinking is what it says. You're to make it like the design of the ephod. Gold, blue, purple, scarlet, and finely twisted linen. It is to be square and doubled over, a span in length and a span in width. And then it begins to go through the jewels, set within it 4 rows of jewels, which we can touch on these another time, but ruby, a row of topaz and emerald for the first row. Turquoise, a sapphire, and a diamond for the second row. A hyacinth, or an agate and an amethyst for the third. And a beryl, an onyx, and a jasper for the fourth row. They are to be enclosed in gold filigree settings. Verse 21, these stones are to be engraved in the order of the names of the sons of Israel, the children of Israel, Bnei Israel, 12 according to their names, like the etchings of a signet seal, 1 corresponding to each name of the 12 tribes. Skip down to verse 29. Aaron will bear, he is to bear the names of the sons of Israel, of the children of Israel, in the breastplate of judgment on his heart, upon his heart, whenever he enters the holy place, as a continually, tamid, continually, a continual memorial before Adonai. You'll remember the light that we talked about a couple days ago. The menorah is to be tamid, lit continually, shining continually, because the Lord never slumbers or sleeps. The high priest is to, whenever he enters the holy place, he brings in on his shoulders and on his heart the etchings engraved before, as a memorial before Adonai. And that idea, zicharon, to remember. To remember is not to, in this regard, is not like, oh, I forgot. It's to bring it to the forefront of your thinking, the forefront. Remember me, O Lord, not as though the Lord has forgotten, but would you bring this to the front of your priority list? Will you bring this to, remember me? And so also put the Urim and the Thummim within the plate of judgment, so they will be on Aaron's heart when he goes in before Adonai. Aaron will bear the judgment of Bnei Israel on his heart before Adonai continually. And so there's this picture, right, that, and the idea, right, that right now, while this is all being said, or at some point, Aaron's like down in the valley with everybody, that he's going to be going to make atonement. And first he's going to have to make atonement for himself and make atonement for them. But right now they're down there making a golden calf. Spoiler alert. So the names, the sons of Israel, the people of Israel, this kingdom of priests, he's to carry the fullness of the weight of them on his shoulders and on his heart into the presence of the Lord continually. Keep this before you continually, O Lord. Right? So this imagery is one of the most powerful parts of the images of the high priest. This is what it means to be a priest, to carry the people with him on his shoulders, on his heart. It's not just about standing before God for ourselves. It's about carrying others in prayer. Yeshua himself is the great high priest, right? And we've studied this in Hebrews, and we look at there's a lot still to go through with the Day of Atonement and so forth, where we're able to look at that. But this idea that the priest, Yeshua, our priest, he bore us on his shoulders. He says, look, you think I've forgotten you? In Isaiah, he says, your names are engraved on my hands. Right, to be engraved on these stones on his shoulders, on his heart. Right, priests don't just serve themselves, they stand in the gap for others. And we're called as a kingdom of priests to do the same. Right? The clothing is we're clothed with purpose, understanding who we're called to be. The clothing wasn't about who Aaron was. The clothing represented who Aaron was supposed to be and how he was to walk and what his purpose was. And we are to be clothed in righteousness. We're to be clothed in righteousness. That's not because we're righteous, but because we've been made righteous. We're called to walk in righteousness and to bear as a kingdom of priests, to enter into the presence of the Lord, not just on behalf of ourselves, but understanding that we stand as a light to the nations, that we stand as his witnesses to make his love and his light known to a hurting and broken world. That's who we're called to be. That's who we're called to be. That's who we need to be. And that's my prayer, is that you and I, that we will be the kingdom of priests that God has called us to be. It's not about you being called to full-time vocational ministry. It's about you standing in the gap, me standing in the gap, being God's representative to the people that we encounter. And then going before him, going into his presence with their names on our hearts and on our shoulders, saying, Lord, I bring them before you. And I carry a responsibility that when I go before them, to be clothed in such a way, spiritually speaking, to be clothed in righteousness so that they can see you, that they can hear you, that they can encounter you. Amen? All right, well, good morning to everyone. Good morning to Joshua and Ron and Amy and Barbara. We're praying. Good morning to Sonia and Margarita, and we're praying for Margarita's health. Hope you're doing well. Good morning to Pat and Lori and to Kathleen and to Joshua and to Joyce and Joe and Sonia, to Koch and to the McCaffreys and to the Eddies, to Lauren and Mike and David and Levi and Valor and Haven and Everett. Good morning to Elizabeth and Jesse and Kelly and Melody Woods. And hope Jerry and Janet are doing well, and Kelly Kenfield and Steve. Hope you're doing well, Steve. And again, if you're able to on top above your tithes, to be able to give toward us being able to really boost our channel, I believe it will be a blessing, and it will bear much fruit, and it's a worthwhile investment. So thank you for your faithfulness as you pray about partnering with us in that way. All right, well, may the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. Shalom, shalom. Have a beautiful day.